So with the approach of summer now, a lot of guys are starting to target sharks, and I thought it appropriate just to show you how I make up my shark trace. There's small little differences with any type of fishing, and those differences will make the difference between you landing a fish or not landing a fish. And that's the difference between possibly using a circle hook or using two single J's. Now, it's not really ethical to use two single J's. A lot of guys have moved to circles, but if you don't want to miss a shark, then I'd suggest using two circle J's. My hook of choice is the Rock Point. I'm going to show you both how to rig a circle or a Rock Point. And very similar. So I start with, I'd say, 1.5 meters, because that's my drop. I can't wind past the swivel. Some people go up to 2 meters. They can go with a 2-meter drop. You're using a 15-foot rod, you can do that. Steal through the hook and then just doing a few wraps. So you can go probably 5 or 6 wraps. And when it gets to the top and it's pointing upwards, then go into the back of the hook. And that's going to give you a nice, neat little knot without having to damage the wire. Often when you make a knot and you pull it up, it kinks the wire. I can do both, but what I find is if you just do a snell knot, the two things that happens is when the hook, if you see how the hook angles, so because it's angled in, as you can see, it's sort of angled in, the fish picks up the bait and it automatically goes into the corner of the mouth. So that's one thing that I do. The other thing is cut very, very close. I don't like having a long tag end, purely because that then snags with the bait if you want to drive the hook further into the bait. Yourself some heat shrink and just cut a piece of heat shrink off. So you just want to cut not a long piece, probably about 1 centimeter long. And this is going to neaten up the knot on your hook. So you can just feed that onto the hook, or you can come in from the back. It doesn't matter which way you do it. And just move that over the eye of the hook. Off a lighter and just heat it up. And this is just going to neaten up. You don't have to do this, and then you can just close it up a little bit. So it doesn't even have to be that long on the hook. It can be a lot shorter. But that's going to give you a nice, neat finish. Once you've finished putting your hook on, what you can do is go from behind with your second hook and just drop that down. So you end up with having 2 J's on there and a much, much better chance of hooking a fish than having one single circle. So you can feed that up and just let that hook ride. As it's there, you can hook your bait in, and then depending on how big your bait is, go in through the nose or wherever you're going to go through, and you can rig it with a double hook. So for me, that's something that's going to give me an added advantage over someone using a single circle. 2 J's are always going to hook better than one single circle. The next thing you want to do is get these little glow beads. It doesn't have to be glow beads, just small beads. You don't want massive beads on your hook or on your trace. And I put one on and another one on. So I've got 2 beads on. So there's 2 things you can do. You can either use a crimp to hold them in place to adjust it, or you can get yourself some very, very thick mono and you can just set that. So we're going to just tie a knot below that. Get the length of your trace. I like to use sort of almost 1 meter, not quite 1 meter of hook trace. So for the swivel, what you're going to do is you're going to go through the swivel like that. And then what I like to do, because I'm using 160-pound wire, it can be quite difficult to twist this wire. And what you want to do, just give yourself a little bit of length there, just so that it makes it easier. And grip it with the pliers, and then you want to go once, twice around the swivel. And then once you've gone twice around the swivel, you're going to come back through the swivel like that. And then what you're going to do is just twist it onto the steel. And the reason for doing that is it keeps your swivel perfectly straight. It doesn't collapse on the steel. What I'm going to do is just put a bit of heat shrink over it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of heat shrink to that. And just finish it off nicely. So there's absolutely no chance of it collapsing. So you've got your heat shrink on your swivel, and that's now going to prevent any twist on your steel wire. So your leader will go onto that, and you're not going to have any collapsing there. I've got 27 kg here, and then you're just going to tie that on. You don't have to position it now because you can move it once you've made the knot. So you just want to go over, under, and create your figure of 8. Open it up with your 2 fingers. Wet it. Not tighten it too tight until you've positioned how far you want to get it. So I want my trace to be just under 1 meter on a hook trace. And then I'm going to tighten that up nice and tight. Nip it off. So those 2 little beads will sit above there now, and you've got a limited sliding trace. You've got about 1/2 meter of limited slide. So this will slide up, your sinker will slide up, the fish will move away with the bait, and the weight of the sinker will start driving the hook into the mouth. Because I'm fishing in the surf and there's not much chance of getting stuck, I'm going to also use a 27 kg. And the reason for that is if you use a thin sinker trace, what will happen is you're going to get a lot of line twist on your shark trace. If you go the slightly thicker sinker trace, it's going to stop you from getting as much line twist as you would with a thinner trace. So what you want is a slightly longer sinker trace than your hook trace. So if you want to clip your sinker, you can do that. So I've got a 6 ounce, you can use a 6 or a 7 ounce sinker, and then you can pre-attach your sinkers if you want, but I don't normally do that. So I've got, and then what you can do is you can now clip your one hook into that, and when you throw the bait you end up throwing it together. So there's about 1 meter long trace, maybe 1.5, and one of the things is if you float your bait, especially when you're fishing for most sharks, what happens is when a shark picks up, you cast your bait in the water, the bait drops down, and that trail comes from the surface. So you've got an oil slick and blood slick coming from the surface, and then what happens is the shark's swimming along, and as he swims along, he swims into that blood trail, an oil trail, and then he's got to start circling to try and find your bait. And as he's circling like this to find your bait, he circles and his mouth's open, and he ends up swimming into your main line. And that's why a lot of guys say that raggies eat up, but they don't eat up. They actually swim into your line accidentally. And to prevent that, if you've got a weight or if you've got a float in your bait, what's going to happen is your sinker is on the bottom and your bait's in mid-water. So your main line is going to be way below that. So when you start circling, you're going to circle, and then he's going to come with his mouth open, and he hasn't swum into your main line, which often happens when fish are looking for bait. So very important to actually add float inside the head of the bait, in the mouth of the mackerel, or if you cut it open, these days the guys are using dangles, they've got a little bit of float, but you really want to float that bait. You want to put lots of float inside it, and that'll help you reduce the chances of getting bitten off. So for me, that is my go-to shark trace. It's a double hook 11-0 with a 6 or a 7 ounce sinker, very, very small beads, and a limited slide with 160 pound 160 pound nylon coated wire. I do enjoy using the Fishmate. It's a very hard steel, so it doesn't kink as much, and I use between the 120 and 160. The 120 you can still get bitten off, but I use it for my smaller traces when I'm using making traces for bronzies, and I'm making what they call a bite trace. This is a full metal jacket where you've got a full piece of steel from the back to the front, and this you'd be using to target fish of anything from 80 to 200, 250 kilos, and you should come right to that. The bigger fish you probably want to go up to a 200 pound, 220 pound, but 160 pound will allow you to get decent bites. The fish don't pick up on the thinner wire rather than the thicker wire. So I hope that helps you, and if you want to see more videos like this, swipe to the left of our page, give us a follow, and we'll catch up in the next video. Thanks for the follows, guys.